Hey everyone, in this video we're talking about health savings accounts, and especially my health savings account. I am going to explain to you what a health savings account is, why you might want one, and why I have nearly $65,000 in mine. I used to have $65,000 saved. It started to slowly shrink a little bit, but still pretty close to that $65,000 number. At the end of this video, I'll give you a tour of my HSA that I have with Optum Bank. I'll also show you how I keep track of my HSA reimbursable expenses in a spreadsheet. And by the way, I'm going to share that spreadsheet with you. It's going to be in a link in the video description below. So you can download it and possibly use it to track your HSA qualified reimbursable expenses. All right, slap subscribe, locate like, and let's get started. Let's start with what is a health savings account, or HSA. An HSA is a tax-advantaged account for healthcare related expenses. That means you can use it on anything related to medical, dental, vision, all that kind of stuff. According to the US Department of the Treasury, HSAs were created in 2003 so that individuals covered by high deductible health plans could receive tax-preferred treatment of money saved for medical expenses. You may have heard of a similar account called a flexible spending account, or an FSA. Well, an FSA typically is something that you can save your money into and get a tax write-off in the year in which you make the contribution and use it for either, qualified medical expenses, or there's even a child care FSA. You can use it to pay for child care expenses, but that money is use or lose each year typically. The HSA is not use or lose. Any money you contribute to it is yours, and you can keep that in the account as long as you have it. You can roll it to a new HSA and always keep that money that you've contributed to your HSA with you and growing until you use it for a qualified medical expense or take it out for some other purpose down the road. We'll get into all that. So health savings accounts have certain attributes that we need to discuss real quick. First of all, this is a US-based account, a US phenomenon. It would be nice if we didn't even need a health savings account. Didn't have to worry about saving a bunch of money for our medical and health-related expenses. But a health savings account is a US account. It's for medical expenses, and the IRS has a surprisingly large list of items that would qualify as medical expenses for your HSA. And the other important thing is that to open or contribute to an HSA, you're going to need to be enrolled in a high deductible healthcare plan. And there are certain attributes that these plans have, typically that they just have a high deductible. And why would we put any money into a health savings account at all versus our own savings accounts? Well, HSAs are very tax advantaged, and once the money is in the HSA, it can be invested. All right, so let's talk about these last 2 points in a little more detail. An HSA is very tax advantaged. It's often called triple tax advantaged because the money can go in tax-free. That is, you can take a deduction when you put money into the account. The money grows inside of the account tax-free. And if you take the money out for a qualified medical expense, it's tax-free on the back end as well. So it is not only possible, but it is designed for you to contribute money that is never taxed. It's not taxed on the way in, it's not taxed while inside, and it's not taxed on the way out. There are limits to how much you can contribute. So assuming you do have a high deductible health plan and you're an individual, you can contribute up to $3,600 in 2021. And if you are a family, you can contribute up to $7,200. If you take money out of your health savings account for any purpose other than a qualified medical expense, you will have to pay a 20% penalty. If you're worried about tying too much money up into the health savings account in case you don't have enough qualified medical expenses, well, after the age of 65, it converts into basically a traditional IRA, and you can take that money out penalty-free. So in that case, maybe you don't get triple tax savings on that money, but you still get double tax savings. And the other great thing about the HSA is that you can invest the money in the account. Typically, you can invest in either mutual funds, or some plans will allow you to connect to a self-directed account at a brokerage and do whatever. So where would you set up an HSA? Well, unfortunately, they're typically set up through a bank. And I say unfortunately because banks really like to charge fees, and you have to be careful when you choose a HSA provider. Look very carefully at their fee schedule. There are some other institutions, such as I know that Fidelity offers an HSA, so if you use Fidelity, that might be a good option. And a lot of times people's health savings account provider is chosen for them through their employer. So for example, maybe your benefits package is somehow tied to a specific HSA, maybe your employer is making contributions to it on your behalf or something like that. And if you're not sure, you'd have to check with your employer and see if there's a specific HSA that's already connected somehow into your paycheck through your employer. It used to be that there was really slim pickings as far as available HSA providers, especially ones that would let you invest in a reasonable way without a lot of fees. I used to use one called HSA Bank, and now I have one through my employer. I rolled that over to the one that's used by my employer, which is Optum Bank. I haven't looked into it too deeply recently, but my impression is that there's a lot more quality HSA providers coming online. If you have an HSA provider that you use and that you like, I'd like to know, so please leave me a comment in the comments below. All right, so let's take a look at my HSA, which I have through Optum Bank. I'm gonna sign in. Okay, I'm logged in, and as you can see right now, my total funds are $64,368.17. I'm not telling you how much I have in there to brag, but more to raise your awareness of this account because it's such a great retirement saving option. And I think more people would and should take advantage of it if they knew fully how it worked. My total funds are kind of split into two sections. There's a cash portion, which is shown here as the HSA total, and then there's an investments section, which is showing $59,366. So it's split into these two sections, you know, what part is sitting in cash and what part is invested. And I keep at least $5,000 in cash in my HSA at all times, and that's to avoid one of the fees that Optum Bank charges if your cash account falls below $5,000. Now you could certainly argue that it would be worth my while to invest that $5,000 and go ahead and take the hit on the fees. But just something in my nature, I really don't like paying fees to banks. And if I can avoid it at all, I will do so. So I have it set up so that it's always got at least $5,000 in the account. And I can invest $100 chunks of money at a time. So I have it set up so that as my cash balance rises to $5,100 or above, it automatically sweeps that $100 over into my investments and leaves my cash account at $5,000. This is done automatically for me, which is really nice. I don't have to think about it. It just, you know, it's very slow dollar cost averaging that runs in the background. So before I started with Optum Bank and I learned about the benefits of a health savings account, I did have through my employer a high deductible health plan, but they didn't offer any kind of HSA, you know, through work at all. So I went out and found one on my own. I found HSA Bank, which at the time would let you invest your money with TD Ameritrade. And so for some number of years, that's where I had my HSA, was at HSA Bank. Then my employer offered a contribution to my HSA each month. They currently contribute $60 out of every paycheck into my HSA, totaling $720 per year, and that would go into Optum Bank. And rather than having then two different HSAs, I went ahead and just transferred my funds from HSA Bank into Optum Bank. At any rate, it's been several years that I've been contributing and investing in an HSA, and I think pretty much maxing it out every single year. And so that's the result, is a rather large balance in my HSA. And of course, I've been investing my HSA all along, and let's look at those investments. Cash portion is really nothing too exciting. You can see how much I've contributed so far, $120, that's come from my employer, as I mentioned, of $60 per month that they contribute on my behalf. And because I'm married, I have a contribution limit of $7,200, which right now leaves me with $7,080 that I can contribute. Once all $720 of employer contributions are contributed to the account, I'll have another $6,480 that I can contribute, and I'll have until my tax filing deadline next year to make that contribution. So now let's look at the investments I have in my health savings account. You can see I've got all of my money, 100% of this, invested in Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund, and I'm just keeping it simple, 100% in that one fund. And you can see the performance year to date, 4.26, 1 year, 33.91, 27% all time. So it's been performing very well, not thanks to anything I've done, but just thanks to the strong bull market that we've been in. Now, if you're curious about what kind of expenses count as qualified medical expenses, jump over to IRS's Publication 502, Medical and Dental Expenses. And this, I believe, is what you can go off of and see what the IRS considers qualified medical and dental expenses. There's a huge list of interesting things that you can count as a qualified medical expense, and if you have an expense in one of these categories, certainly, make a record of it, keep the receipt, and you'll be able to reimburse yourself completely tax-free at any time you choose. So as I mentioned, it is important to track your expenses if you're gonna pay out of pocket now and let your money grow in your health savings account. You want to make sure you have a good system, record-keeping system, to keep track of those expenses and to keep those receipts. Now, you can keep those receipts in a shoebox, I suppose. Receipts do have a tendency to fade over time or get lost, and so I think it's a wise idea to scan those, take a picture with your phone or whatever, and store them digitally somewhere where where you can access them and not lose track of where they are. To that end, I do have an HSA expense tracking spreadsheet that I use. It's pretty straightforward. You've got just several columns here, including service date, the statement date from the bill, the date you paid the bill, the invoice or account number, the medical office or pharmacy, what have you. It could even be a grocery store if it's something like Band-Aids and you're getting going to reimburse yourself for Band-Aids. You can certainly save the receipt for wherever you bought those Band-Aids. Continuing along, the name of the individual who incurred the expense, the amount of the expense, whether or not it was reimbursed, and of course you could filter any of these, so you could say, I only want to see expenses that were not reimbursed. And then you have those, and then you can have a total here. If you select them all, you can look down here and you'll know you have $642.40 of unreimbursed expenses, which you can withdraw from your health savings account at any time, and that will be completely tax-free. And this next column is receipt. So as I mentioned, you can scan in your receipts. I scan mine and put them in Evernote. You could use another service, maybe Google Docs or Microsoft Drive or whatever that is. Somewhere online, scan your receipt, store it digitally, and then in this column you can point to where it is, whether it's a local drive or whether it's out on a service on the web. And then the last column is for notes, and you can add any notes about that expense in the notes column. It's a simple, straightforward spreadsheet, but that works for me for tracking purposes. Got everything easily accessible to me. I can find those receipts and I can see what was reimbursed and what was not reimbursed over time and go back and pull any of that out. So if the IRS asks if they need to see any of those receipts and I need to prove those expenses, I've got that. Usually I'll scan the statement and the receipt, have both. Scan it in, put it in my digital storage location, enter the information into the expense tracking spreadsheet, and that's it. If you'd like to download the spreadsheet for yourself to keep track of your own HSA expenses, you can download it in the video description below. It's completely free, and feel free to just open it up in Google Sheets, make a copy, and you can start editing it, putting in your own information, however you want to use it. So that's what I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to my channel. I'm creating new videos weekly on saving, investing, and early retirement.